great to be here demonstrating HTMX and talking about how we can take server-side rendering and server-side web development to the next level and add that aspect that gives your server-side development projects that look and feel for more of a spa or client-side environment. Okay, so a little bit about me. We'll get back on track. Sorry about that little snafu. My name is Chris Woodruff. Everyone calls me Woody. I'm an architect at a company called RT2. We do technology for cell phone companies. And you can see a little bit. I am an old guy. I've been in the industry almost 30 years, nearly. So I kind of have a perspective from when we started web development until today. So let's dig into that. So the goals of this talk are really to learn about HTMX. That's why we're here. We're going to walk through some examples, and we're not going to fix a business application, but there is a business application that we can fix down the road if you go into my workshop that I will talk about at the end. So what is HTMX? So HTMX is a JavaScript library. So you do have to run JavaScript for HTMX, but it's a very small library. It's 15 kilobytes. There's no dependencies. So you're not going to get this bloat with lots of other libraries that you have to pull into your project. It was created by Carson Gross in 2020, and it came from another project, another open source project called Intercooler that started in 2014. So HTMX is open sourced, and you can see the code out on GitHub. So you can dig in and help and see if there's anything that needs to happen. So I love this image, and we're going to go through a little walk through history. So this image just makes me laugh because 20 years ago, we had a very simple model for development, and you can see that in the picture. Then we went to this complex, SPA, which you know what? We have great web experiences now and great applications, but I think they have been created on the backs of complexity. So now with HTMX, we can take some of that and make it simple again and bring the simplicity of web development back to most developers. So in the beginning, there was the simple web, and all we had was HTML. I started development on the internet when I discovered this weird application called Mosaic that happened to be loaded up on the Michigan State University servers. We had Solaris servers, so we could access applications on the servers. And this Mosaic app came up, and we were all the students that lived in the labs started using it, and it was awesome. And I remember when there were only about 12 websites on the internet. And actually, I created the first sports fan website for the Detroit Tigers. It's a baseball team here in America. And all we had was HTML. We didn't have CSS. We just called everything websites. Then if we progress, we kind of hit what we call the corporate web. And the corporate web was a lot of proprietary technologies. So you can see our ActiveX, and we had Java applets, and we had Flash, and Microsoft had Silverlight. And that's really when CSS and JavaScript came to the forefront, and we started getting a little more activity activity in the web browser with JavaScript and the CSS. We could make things look and feel a little more responsive, which was awesome. And that's kind of when SOAP came out, and calls over HTTP, kind of before REST became big and all that. So I call that kind of calls over HTTP. Some people call it RPCs and stuff like that. And then we had Web 2.0. And that's really when jQuery came in, and everyone, we had what I call browser limitations, which means that we all had to program for Internet Explorer. And this is also when Microsoft, if you're a Microsoft developer, Microsoft came out with their Ajax kind of story and their Ajax development experience in libraries. And that really gave us some ways to take our, if I remember right, our web forms and add a little more responsiveness and not have to fully like refresh a full page. We could just refresh parts of a page. And then it all happened around the 2010s. SPA came in, and everyone was doing everything in the browser. So we had JavaScript in the browser, and that's when HTML5, CSS3, ES5, all the like great things that we've experienced as web developers came out, and we had really great web experiences for our users. That's really when mobile HTTP grew. We could have responsive websites, and that's really where the rise of the single page application, or SPA, came about. But as we've seen, as we've grown and as the web has matured, complexity has entered our jobs, and it's very complex. I love React and Vue and Angular, but they are complex. I mean, dealing with the DOM and doing everything in the browser is complex. Going back to APIs from your browser-based application adds even more complexity, because you got to take care of JWTs with authentication, and there's a lot of complexity. So in the last couple of years, people have discovered, and I'll do the air quotes, discovered that they can do server-side development. And we see that with React server components and Angular server-side rendering. But for people like me, I never stopped doing server-side development. I love server-side development. I think for certain aspects of work, they do great things, and we don't have to add that complexity. So let's take a look at how HTML or HTMX can really help us. So first, we have to take a look at hypermedia systems. So if you know anything about REST, you know hypermedia systems is part of the HATEOAS. I've never really figured out how to pronounce that, but it stands for hypermedia as the engine of application state. And Roy Felding came out with this idea for REST. And there's a couple facts that I do want to talk about. If you think you build REST APIs and you use JSON, JSON is not REST. If you take a look at the sixth construct of the REST architecture suggestions, you should be passing code back to your application from the server or from someplace else that you're getting your logic or wherever your REST calls are going. So that's what HTMX really does. It allows us to make calls, send back replacement code, replacement HTML, and give the user this experience of seeing that new code shown to them in the web browser. So originally we had this idea that we just did web requests, and we would get back responses. We would get back everything that we needed, and it was a simple kind of idea. And we also had this idea for forms. Forms came out, and we would do posts, and it would go back to our web browser, and we would get some kind of response, usually a 200 OK response, and there would be something in that response that we would show as the response from a submission to that form. And that is really the idea that I really call REST, is that we're making a call, we're sending it over to a server with a HTTP verb, and we are doing something on the server and getting a response with some replacement code that we can show the user. And in this case, we're showing a header one, just saying thank you for signing up from the form in this browser page. So the limitations of Web 1.0 in terms of hypermedia was that originally there were only two ways that we could make these kind of requests. We could either do links or we could do forms. And we could do clicks and we could do submits, which means that we would either call a get verb for a click and a post verb for a submit. So we're very limited on what we could do. And this usually meant that we only had the ability to refresh entire screens. And why was that? I mean, it would be nice to expand on that. And that's really what HTMX does. So any element should be able to make HTTP requests. Buttons should, divs should, input HTML element should, forms, images, tables, they all should be able to make HTTP requests. And how HTMX handles that is with these actions, and we'll look at this in code, but we have a number of different actions that we can do to render and simulate HTTP calls for certain verbs. And this is hx-get and -post and -put and -patch and -delete. And those are really the 5 most popular HTTP verbs that we all use today. So HTMX allows us to do any type of HTTP verb action. We can do triggers. So an event should trigger a HTTP request. We should be able to replace any code on our page or on our web page. And that should all be replaceable. And we can do that by using hx.target and hx.swap. And we'll take a look at what those do in a little while. So we can do all that, and we can do other things. And these are the other things that we can do. And I'm not going to really touch on these advanced topics in this talk, but we can do CSS transitions in addition to the Ajax that we're going to talk about in this talk. But you can do CSS transitions. You can work with your browser history. We can work with WebSockets as a network protocol. and we can use server sent events directly in HTML. So all those are a little more advanced, and I'm not going to be getting into those, but in my workshop that I am developing for HTMX, I am going to have a little more explanation and some demos for those advanced topics. So how do we get started? Uh, the easiest way is just to add HTMX to your layout. If you're a ASP.NET developer, you know we have the layout for our web project, and that really holds the header and the footer for most of our pages. And we can just add the ability to bring in that script for HTMX from the unpackaged.com website. Or if you do want to add HTMX as a NuGet dependency in your project, you can add HTMX, and there is another NuGet package called Tag Helpers that will give you additional functionality with HTMX. So that's kind of how you get started and get moving along, and it's really simple to do. So how do we trigger HTMX? So I think I showed in a previous slide that we can call lots of different verbs in our web pages using HTMX. And again, this is kind of the hx.get, and we'll take a look at how we use that in some code. But I just wanted to reiterate that each one of these HTMX trigger parameters corresponds to a different HTTP verb. So how do we target? So in this example, we have a div, and the div has an ID of main. And we have a button, and that button is going to get contacts. So we can say hx.get, and then that will send over a get verb to a server side link for /contacts. So in terms of I'm going to be doing Razor pages, it will correspond to a method in Razor page behind your web page for that catches that get verb and does some type of work that hopefully works with contacts. And we're going to target, so that hx.target is saying, when I get this code back, this from my REST call, I'm going to target main, which is the div, and I'm going to replace the entire target with what comes back from this this get call for contact coming back. And this is what happens coming back. So that call will send back a segment of HTML. In this case, it's a div with a list of contacts in it, and the previous div of ID main gets replaced with the new code that gets sent back from the HTMX call. And we'll take a look at some examples, but I just really wanted to show you kind of what is going on from a high level. So we can also swap, and there's lots of different ways that we can use swap. And it allows us to add or replace or do lots of different things in our web pages. So hx.swap, when we say outer HTML, it means that we are going to replace the entire target that we're focusing on. So this is the main. So this is the div, and we're going to replace the entire main with what we are sending back. So Yeah. So, okay, let me retract. So I made a snafu. So outer HTML, I think just outer should replace the. I should have a div on this because you can do an inner HTML that replaces everything inside of what you're targeting. So I have a little snafu in here. I should have a replacement div element and a ending div element. So just remember that. So we can do a number of different things with hx.swap. So we can do inner HTML, so that replaces the inner code of our target element. Uh, we've already talked about outer HTML. We can say before begin, after begin, before end, after end. So we can say delete. So we can just delete the element regardless of the response. And we can say none. So none is kind of if you're doing something else, maybe you're swapping out CSS or something. None is used if you want to do something in your web page that's kind of hidden. So I haven't used none very much, but it's still a possible swapping strategy for HTMX. So there are different ways to where we add this replacement code or replacement HTML that comes back from the server. And we can do events. So in this case, we have a div of main, and we have a button in there. And instead of a button just having a link, we can have an HTMX trigger event on the mouse enter, and it just allows us to do events. So I could have a div, and I could actually say, hey, if a browser comes into this div, trigger something and get something back. So it's not just a mouse enter or a mouse click. You can there's lots of different events that we can do. We can also replace the logic in our forms to take on a little more HTMX with our forms, and this just is again, uh, we have a button on our form, and we're going to do a post to contact, and we have our target, a main. So this is another way of doing HTMX forms instead of the traditional form. And it gives you a little more uh, capabilities beyond just what the bare boned HTML standard gives you. So why use HTMX with ASP.NET Core? Um, I like the server side development story and the robustness and the quickness that I can develop applications, but I still like that client side experience, and I want to give some of that client side experience to my users. So that's the first reason why I use HTMX. The second one is for Razor pages, we have this idea of partial. And partial really allows us to leverage the HTMX Ajax programming style really effectively. And we'll look at that in some examples. And we are trying to balance the code between the client and the server. So up to, up to about 15 years ago, I would say most work was done primarily on the server side. And through the next 10 years, it really switched over to a majority of the code was done on the client side. And there really needs to be a balance in there. And so I like having balance. I like utilizing both sides equally and utilizing each side to their strengths and work away from weaknesses. And the last one is we're allowing ASP.NET Core to have a improved user experience without JavaScript. Now you're going to say, hey, HTMX is JavaScript. So I'm saying, what I would say back is, well, without any additional JavaScript beyond HTMX. So remember, HTMX is only about 15 kilobytes. It's really small. And beyond that, you don't really have to have very much anything else in terms of JavaScript. Now, some of my examples you do, and you can take a look in the code for those, but you can do a great user experience without additional JavaScript beyond HTMX. So let's take a look at some examples. Okay, so I'm going to run this project, and you can get this project off of my repo. So this project is just a bunch of different examples, demos that you can take a look. So let's take a look at active search. So I'm going to search for country. Oh, I misspelled countries. Oh, that's really good. So I'm going to say United, and it does a search. I didn't press enter. It actually triggered on each keystroke, but it has delay, and we'll take a look at that. So if I take a look at countries or countries that have United in them, it brings back this. And this comes from a third-party REST API that I can take a look at. So let's take a look at that. So let's take a look. This is the web page for my for that search, that active search, and you can see that. Let me pull this over a little bit. You can see what this form is doing. So the form has a class, it has a type, and I'm going to come in and say HTMX post. So this is the URL on the server side that I'm going to call for my search. And we'll take a look at this this code, this C# code in a second. So my trigger, so the trigger event, the event that is doing this is key up changed, and I'm going to delay by a half a second because I don't want my search to happen every single keystroke, but I want it to really happen when I stop typing. And that will come in and do my search. It's going to target this element that has search results, and that search result is, let's see where that is, down here. So it's going to replace this table body with whatever is coming back from the server side. And then we can do indicator and we can do headers. So this is just saying we're going to send over a request verification token to make sure that we don't get any funny business in our web app. It makes it a little safer. So this request token just allows us to have a safe experience using HTMX. But let's take a look at the code behind this. So you can see I've got everything kind of set up. I've got HTTP client to call this third party. I'm going to do an on get. So this is reacting to any get verbs coming over from the other side. So this just kind of sets and stores my that token that that I want to use to make my search a little safer. And then we're going to come down to that search text. And that search text is what we called in here, right there. And so we're going to kind of come in, we do that search, and we come over here and we have this binding is just the search results. But if we take a look at this method right here on post search, HTMX follows a certain way of naming for our server side methods. So this is saying on a post, and then whatever comes behind the verb for that search is what we kind of use from our call. So in this case, it's going to come in. It's the web app is going to say, I have a post event or a post verb, and I need to look for search. And so ASP.NET knows that this method is for a post event and it's for the search. And in here, a simple call through my HTTP client to get to go out to this restcountries.com and send in my search text, and it sends back a list of countries. I'm going to then build a JSON collection of all my countries, and this is where partial comes in. So I'm going to return the partial for search result _ search result with those countries. And you can see here over in my code, I have a partial razor page that takes in a list of countries, and it builds each table row with that country name. And this is what gets sent back. So the results of this partial will be sent back to here. And because I'm saying my target result is search result, it replaces everything inside my, it adds everything inside this table body. So this is where those rows get added, and we can see that in our code that these got added inside the table. So that's kind of one example. Let's take a look. I'm not going to go through all of these, but let's take a look at click to edit. So click to edit. This is an interesting one. I have first name, last name, email. So I have Darth Vader, and we're going to send Darth Vader email to Mustafar.com. So his lava home planet. And we can say, we're going to edit this, and we're going to say, you know what? We're going to say Death Star. So now he lives at the Death Star. We're going to change that email, and then we can say submit, and this gets replaced. So let's take a look at that code example. So we're going to hide all this. We're going to come in and do click to edit. And so in here we have some code, and this click to edit is using a partial. So we're going to say show the contact form from display contact form. So initially this partial page gets brought in. It uses the model first name, last name, email, which comes from the backend code. If we take a look at index, we can see that that the model is set up. Well, that model set up here, and we have a contact service. So this is in. I'll talk about contact service or services that we can use inside of our web pages, but you may be familiar with those. We can kind of have additional code that we throw into our dependency injection to allow us to have these kind of backend services that will let us get certain information. So in this case, we're going to build a contact and we're going to add Darth Vader and we're going to send back an email. It's kind of just an easy way to send this back, so I don't really have to go back to a database or some resource behind. But what I'm going to do in here is when I have this partial, so this display contact, I have a button on here. Remember, I clicked the button to edit this, and I have a HTTP verb. So hx.-get is going to say, hey, call this link, call this URL with the get verb, and we are going to do something. So you can see we didn't have a target in here. So we're not targeting anything. We're just going to call this, and we're going to send over a handler for edit contact. And that gets sent over. See how much time I've got. So we are going to on get edit contact. So this partial view, so this method is going to get called, and we're going to return another partial view. In this case, we're going to go out and we're going to go out to that contact service and get the contact. Like I said, this is just an easy way to not have me write a bunch of code to get to a database or something. I can get just some static code from my app. I'm going to then call this partial razor page, and I'm going to send over the contact. And what gets sent over here is this partial page sends back a form, and this form allows me to edit the first name, edit the last name, and edit the email, the contact that was sent in. And then I'm going to have a button that for submit, and that button will then do a get, and it will send over, and it will say click to edit, handler display contact, and for the cancel. So if I do want to cancel out, it just goes back to the display contact. If I submit, just like any good form, it will come back here, and the form says, if you submit this form, go to click to edit, index handler, replace contact, and target is this. So when you have a target is this, it means target yourself. So it's going to target the form, and we're going to say outer HTML. So replace the entire target with whatever comes back. And what comes back is the replacement contact. And that replacement contact comes over and calls this method, which calls the contact service and sends over the updated model and the ID for that, and we're going to update that. So this simulates updating a contact or some type of model in a database or someplace that we have our data stored. And so we're going to update that model, and then we're going to call display contact form, the original partial, and we're going to send over that model, and we get right back to where we started. So it's really simple. I don't think HTMX is super hard. I'm going to run through because I've only got about 5 minutes. I want to show some demos in here. If I want to delete, I can HTMX can also work with Sweetwater. So this is kind of how I'm doing. So this is some additional JavaScript just to do these notification toasts. I can say, do I want to delete this? Yes, and the the line gets deleted. So I could do that again and delete it, and it gets deleted. Uh, I could say edit row. Again, a lot of us do these inline edits, and I could say just add on some stuff. I could say save, and it gets saved. The code behind it is very similar to what we were doing in the other examples, and you can take a look at that code inside my examples off of my repository, which I'll give you a link to in just a few minutes. We can do file upload. So that's an interesting example. Infinite scroll. This is kind of fun. What if you just wanted to keep scrolling and bringing up additional information from your database? So in this case, I just keep dynamically creating new records to add to the end. So in this case, I do want to show an example for infinite scroll. And let's take a look at that because that shows a different example of how we can do swap. So if we take a look at this, HTMX, so what we're doing with this is we're just doing this get, and each time we do a get, we're getting a new set of data that we're going to then swap. So we're doing this HTMX swap on our target, and we're saying after end. So we're not replacing anything. We're just adding stuff to the end of our target, and the trigger is revealed. So this event is when I scroll to the end of my list, it will trigger this event to then go out and get more records that I can show in the list. So it looks like it's just infinitely scrolling forever. Let's take a look at, scroll back up. I scrolled quite a bit. Let's take a look at inline validation. So I'm going to come in and I'm just going to fill out some information. And right now, it gave me this email address is valid. But what if I didn't give a valid email address? This is a notification that just comes up. All of us have done this type of validation before. HTMX just allows us to do that a little more simple. I think you can take a look at the code example. It gives us a little more adaptability. It gives us a little more to maybe do things with regular expressions, or we can leverage other type of validation. Maybe you like to validate stuff with fluent validation. Well, in this case, I can, and it doesn't have to happen at the submit. I can actually have it do my validation whenever I edit the data that's in one of these input elements. Let's take a look at selects. So this is, a lot of people do this. We have two drop downs. The second drop down reacts to the first one. If I change this, the models that are shown down in the second drop down list will change. So if I want to take a look at BMW models, I can have that. So again, this is kind of a nice thing to have if you want to dynamically populate other things based on selections from the user in other places in your web page. Tabs. So this is just a nice way if you want to build tabs. This is basically when I click on a new tab, it replaces everything in the tab to make it look like I'm on. In this case, I'm going to be on the third tab. This one's the second tab, and this one's the first tab. So not a very attractive tab experience. I'm not really a designer, but it just shows you what you can do. And each click for each one of these tabs will just do a HT. It will replace the entire kind of div that this tab lives in. What else do we have? We have click to load. So we had the infinite scroll, but now I could just do like, hey, click this to load more woodies. And so I'm just going to load more woodies into the list. And again, instead of hitting that revealed trigger event, I'm going to use just a link trigger event, and it's still going to do the after end for that hx dot swap. So it's just going to end or add additional woodies to the end of the page. But I am pretty much at the end of my time. I want to have some time to get some questions answered if anyone has questions. But if you want to get the code and you want to kind of learn more about HTMX in the future, you can go out to htmx-workshop.com. I am building out kind of a workshop on how to use HTMX and giving some examples. I'm going to have a full business application that leverages HTMX. It's almost done. Within a couple of weeks, it'll be out there and you can take a look at it. Also from here, you can get to all the code examples I showed and the slide deck that you're looking at right now. So I want to say thank you for spending some time with me, and I really appreciate JetBrains for having me on. And here's some contact information if you do want to get a hold of me and ask questions or learn more, or just to say whatever. Tell me all the stuff I did wrong in my talk, or all the stuff I did right that you enjoyed. So, and that's about it. I'll ask Khalid and Rachel to come back. I don't know what I have to do to
We're back.
You're back. Thank
we just
you.
like show up out of nowhere and here we are.
Yes.
And then you can't get rid of us.
Yep. So yeah, a lot of people have been talking about HTMX in the chat.
Yeah.
Let's get to viewer questions. The
Sure.
first one I see, Rachel, and this is clearly a common question people have coming from SPA. Doesn't HTMX slightly increase bandwidth consumption and server processing load? So, Chris.
So actually, it lessens. Think about it. If I'm not having to refresh an entire page, and I'm refreshing just part of a page, that's going to be less things crossing the wire. Um, so in my opinion, it actually improves by having less stuff go across the wire. And also, if you reload a whole page, then your browser has to do all the things that you've set up in the metadata, in the header and the footer of your page. So there could be additional processing based on whatever you have in your default layout. In my case, default layout for Razor pages.
Mhm. Yeah, you kind of mentioned historically too. It's like we started with small JSON payloads, but now if you open up the inspector in any modern web application, those JSON payloads can be humongous. So
They can.
it's kind of a big trade-off there. As always, any good consultant will tell you it depends. So it's
Yep.
going to depend on your use case.
Yeah, it really does. But HTMX allows you to have to do Ajax, which theoretically you're only going to replace a small part of your page and not have to do a full page refresh. So
Yeah, that's where the whole point is: smaller loads, more
yep,
more chatty, less chunky
yep,
type of calls. So
yep,
yeah.
yep.
This should be the slogan: less chatty, more chunky.
I like chunky.
Those the actual like technical terms from Microsoft back
Yes,
in the day
yes.
about those calls. Yeah.
Yep.
Chatty versus chunky.
Rachel, do you have another question for Chris?
Yeah. So when is HTMX not a good idea?
Oh, that's a really good question. I mean, one, we've talked about it. If you have to refresh your whole page, HTMX may not be the best thing. You can still do it, but it may not be the most optimized.
Mhm.
I'm trying to think what else, because that is such a good question. Khalid, do you have any ideas
You know,
when
it's
it's not?
it's funny. Yesterday, I built a Keylight app that just works on HTML and JavaScript. There's no server backend, so if you're writing a completely self-contained application that has no server backend, yeah, just use regular JavaScript. You don't need HTMX in that particular
Yeah,
scenario.
yeah,
Yep.
exactly. I mean, I wouldn't put HTMX really inside of a full blown spa application
Mhm.
myself. I think it would be kind of overkill.
Let's see another way. Chris, from your experience, how straightforward is it to break out of the HTMX abstraction when you have to? Let's say you're updating a live region near the top of the DOM after HTMX asynchronous updated a section lower down the page, I guess. So,
Hmm.
um, like, do you? I guess the question the individual is asking is like, do you always have to use the HTMX abstraction, or can you decide to use something else to accomplish a task on a particular page?
Well, sure, you could use other JavaScript library to do other things. Uh, you could, if you were having your web page react to things that are being thrown to you. I mean, we do have this server side event that we can handle in HTMX, but say you did have JavaScript to do some kind of reaction to something coming back. Maybe it's I don't know, a event from Kafka, or I mean,
Yeah. Well,
yeah.
even
So
even just a simple example though, specific to this question, maybe you have an accordion on the page. You could just implement that client side behavior with regular JavaScript.
hmm,
There's really no need for server interaction in that scenario. So again, I've seen a
yeah.
lot of people when they use HTMX also use a JavaScript library called Alpine, which
Hmm,
allows you to declaratively add these attributes on elements to create those client-side interactions. So
Okay.
yeah, that's kind of a cool thing to do.
Yeah. So if no one knows, Khalid's a kind of a big deal in the HTMX world. So,
No, I wouldn't.
yeah, you
do that.
are. You are.
Wrote a
So,
blog post on it.
yeah, I mean, and he actually helps out with a lot of the open source libraries for HTMX. So,
Yeah,
so
I'm glad to help folks. So
yeah, I know, but I gotta give you your props. So you got me interested in HTMX. So you know, I mean, I will admit you know more than I do with this stuff. So it's good to bounce stuff off of you.
we're here to share knowledge, so everyone
I know we
has
are.
something to contribute. So I think that's kind of the cool part.
It is.
Rachel, do you have any last questions?
No, I don't think so. Did we get them all?
Yeah, I think so. Folks are asking that link you posted, Chris. Is that page up yet, or
It
No,
is.
okay?
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
So
You got a 4?
It's in the comments. 404.
Okay, well, I will go take a look. Maybe basically the whole app is a markdown, and maybe there was an action to refresh it, and the DNS got messed up on the GitHub pages side. So I'll get that fixed in the next couple minutes.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I mean, definitely this was a great talk. Thank you so much, Chris.
Thanks,
I really do hope folks check out HTMX. It's kind of neat, and one of the things I love about it is just kind of what our previous speaker talked about. It's like good old MVC, razor pages, simplicity. That's kind of what it's all about. So
Yeah.
again, thank you, Chris, for championing that.
Thanks. I just love it because we can actually have an example of the sixth constraint of REST. And I can actually say that I have done all 6 constraints of REST, and I am fully REST. Not
If you do
restful.
each one on a different continent,
Yeah.
you could do it
Because it's
worldwide.
always that 6th one that everyone goes, hey, so what's an example of the sixth constraint of the sixth constraint of REST? And you kind of go, oh, but now with HTMX, I can go, well, HTMX. So
Yeah.
Yep.
All right. Well,
Okay.
thank you again, Chris. Folks, please follow Chris on social media. Go to his links, and you can check out more from Chris's work. Again, thank you so much, Chris. Always a pleasure to talk to you. And yeah, we'd love to have you back at some point. So,
Okay. Thanks, everyone.
that.
Have a great day.
Bye.
Bye.